Hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening to all the folks joining this edition of Arka Talks. I am Dhanasree, an Arka Alum, and currently finishing my MBA at Chicago Booth and interning with Menlo Ventures. I will be moderating this fireside chat celebrating the Women's History Month with our special guest today, Usha Amin of SAHA Fund and Sonal Puri of Webscale. Thank you, Usha and Sonal, for joining us. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Usha and Sonal about their journeys and how it is like to be in the front lines of tech and VC as women entrepreneurs. So I'll start off with a brief introduction about Arka. Arka Venture Labs is an early stage cross-borders accelerator fund, enabling Indian B2B startups scale globally with tech, capital, mentoring, and in-depth access to both Silicon Valley and Indian startup ecosystems. Arka is one of the first accelerators with a dedicated focus on the US-India cross-border enterprise, backed by 3 early-stage VC firms, BGV, Bloom, and Emergent, as its anchor investors. It's a pleasure to introduce Sonal. Sonal serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Webscale, a cross-border enterprise from pre-product, and has recently closed $26 million in growth financing. Congratulations. Prior to Webscale, she was the Chief Marketing Officer at Aryaka Networks and led sales, marketing, and alliances for the pioneer in SaaS for global enterprise networks, from pre-product to Series D. Now on to Usha. Usha is the co-founder of SAHA Fund, which is the first venture capital fund registered with SEBI to empower women entrepreneurship in India. It has currently invested in 11 companies with 7 active portfolio. Usha is mentoring them to excel in their sectors, helping them scale successfully, and creating more employment and growth opportunities in the ecosystem and impacting gender parity. Saha's portfolio companies have not only focused on growing their business, but also on women's welfare. Usha has been an entrepreneur as well in sectors such as power electronics, renewable energy, and now in her newest stint in venture capital. I'm grateful to have you both on this panel. I'll start off with a few questions in the first half and then take audience questions in the second half. Starting off with you, Sonal, you've had an impressive journey so far, and I believe it would be helpful for the audience if you can speak about your early career and how you ended up starting your own business.
Yeah. Sure, Dhanasree. Pleasure to be here. Thank you all for taking the time to attend the session. I know it's late at least in India, and it's early in the Pacific time zone. So I appreciate it. My journey actually, when you look back, it feels like it was easier than it was, and sometimes it's you remember the difficult times. But broadly, I was born in India, and then went to school all the way through high school. Went to college in India to the Sir J.J. College of Architecture, got my degree, which was a B.Arch, interestingly enough. Was fortunate to work with one of the most well-known architects in India, a gentleman called Charles Correa. It's absolutely brilliant to work with. Was again fortunate to get a scholarship to come to the US to study at USC. Building science was my major. And I ended up focusing on computer applications and architecture because of some of the people that I worked with at USC. Found I was really drawn to to the technology in architecture. So whether it was lighting design or building design, anything to do with CAD systems was very interesting to me. And then I graduated, came to the Valley, was dating an engineer. So there was no other place to go except the Silicon Valley. And once I got here, I realized architecture was not the best profession to be financially stable in the Valley. So very quickly, I started doing some freelance work, got introduced to a number of startups. I was doing, websites and collateral and so on and so forth, whatever design influence I could have. And one of those entrepreneurs offered me a full-time role in my first startup. That was a company called Euclid. That entrepreneur actually is now a VC in India as well. So it's a small world. So that was my first startup. That sort of started off the journey. That was an internet infrastructure. It was actually very early. We were setting up equipment and data centers for e-commerce companies, interestingly enough. And this was in the late 90s. So fast forward, been at Inktomi, at Akamai, at Speedera, at Aryaka. I've been very fortunate to work with some really great people. A lot of them are actually US India entrepreneurs who worked on either side. So it's been a fun journey, but it's actually been sort of straightforward, just being in the right circles, getting to know the right people, having them introduce you to your next opportunity, and you just take whatever comes your way.
I guess it's so interesting that you started off in architecture, but now you're the CEO of a network, a company. It's brilliant. I would want to dig deeper, and I'm sure our audience also has a lot of questions on that. But now switching to Usha, you've also had an amazingly interesting journey. Would love to hear what were your early career decisions and how did you eventually end up in the world of venture capital building SAHA?
Yeah. Thank you to have us here, and thank you all the participants. Hope this meeting is meaningful even for all of them. To start off, interesting, Sonal. I'm so impressed with your journey to see the various, from India to US and from architecture to very interesting. So mine, I did my graduation here in Bangalore, Mount Carmel, with science as a major. And from that, went on to doing CA. And the time when we did CA, there weren't any classes. So from science to commerce was, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And, learning the debit credits for the first time and things like that, and learning it on our own. So, and we had to do our articleship when we did our CA. So it was pretty tough, and morning going for work and evening studying to give the exams. But nevertheless, I think the mathematics helped. So got through in the first attempt, of course. And then I joined the industry, the telecom. This was a Netherlands-based company with ITI, in collaboration with ITI. We were manufacturing VSATs. So it was a very interesting start. And manufacturing is a very interesting sector because I think there's a whole lot of dynamics that you learn through, and for the first 10 years was going through the organization, building it up. Then I moved on to IT, worked with a US and UK based company. I was a CFO there. And it was actually I think software IT was very, very easy because we had various kinds of exemptions, so you didn't have to do any taxations there. So other than doing strategies in trying to build the business. So I think that helped me in the management of the organization, growing it in various different sectors. Like at that time, the call centers were emerging, the BPO sectors were emerging, and we ventured into that. And that was, of course, a very, very challenging time to build in those businesses. So that was a very good stint. And from there, I went on to the entrepreneurship of power electronics with my husband and friends, and did that for about 6 years. And of course, life gives you a turn, you see, and when you're faced with certain uncertainties and you become vulnerable to various incidents which happen, brought me into doing something which would empower women, because I really realized how difficult it is to overcome situations when you're thrown into deep seas. So that was where my journey started, and went on to meet people like Mohandas Pai and Ankita and all of them, and this idea came up, and we started that together. And that I think was a very interesting start, because this was a new thing in India, especially that there wasn't any funds so called for women entrepreneurship, and I know how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur and manage funds, because as long as you're on the job, I think it's all very structured, but when you're into entrepreneurship, is trying to haggle around with so many balls all at the same time. And that's the most difficult thing. And financing was one of the factors, just one of the factors of the very many, but nevertheless an important one, which helps you actually scale through peacefully rather than going through on a day-to-day kind of a basis of managing your resources. And in India, especially, the banking industry is not so industrial friendly, so to say. like in other countries. So I think managing your funds becomes one of the major hurdles to scale. And starting off with this venture, of course, the challenges of getting a good pipeline, because every LP that we met to invest had the only question as where is the pipeline? And I mean, you have a pipeline, but a good pipeline, basically, to have good entrepreneurs who could actually make it for an investment. So of course, now I think we have really come across with very good entrepreneurship in terms of, I think, the accelerator programs. Like, I think Bloom is also doing a lot of good accelerator programs, and of course many others too are. And so I think we've crossed that stage now. and yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. So Sonal, I'm looking at your background, and you say that like failure is not an option. It's super inspiring. And so my next question is in line with it. Entrepreneurship, both in terms of raising a fund or building a startup, there are so many times when you feel like, oh, this is going to fail, or like there'll be hundreds of people who will say that, oh, this is never going to work. So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with the prospect of failure?
If you talk to my dad or my sister or my husband, they'll say, what other people say never bothers me. It's always like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. No one can stop me, kind of, wired that way. But I've never felt in any of the startups that I've been at that it's going to fail. I felt frustrated. I felt, why is this not working? I felt like there's something wrong with me. That happens very often. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll tell you the same thing. But I've never felt like any of these businesses that I've been associated with, been fortunate to be associated with, were going to die. Even though I will say there's a couple of startups that in the early days, like when we were at Speedera, I know we almost ran out of cash. We were, our CEO announced at a lunch meeting that he had closed 20 million in funding. And he said that Friday we were running out, we wouldn't have been able to make payroll. So I know we've come very close to the end, but never feared that. I think it's more just making sure that you make a decision, whatever that is. If you need to cut costs, you have to do it. If you need to sort of make changes to the product, you have to be willing to do it. You just have to assume that you don't have all the answers, and if you're just going to tinker with it long enough, it's going to work. But strangely enough, I don't know, maybe it's a personality type or the people that I'm surrounded by that are very optimistic, but never felt it was going to fail. So it's just one of those things, I suppose.
Sure. And Usha, you mentioned that there were so many uncertainties when you were starting up, especially in the power electronics sector in India. How did you deal with uncertainty, and were there any like challenges you faced specifically?
Yeah, so as an entrepreneur, like Solomon mentioned, is every day a challenge that you have to see what the next morning is going to look like. In terms of uncertainties as an entrepreneur in India, and especially for a woman, I think there are very many. For example, simple things like, okay, I mean, not looking at production, all those challenges anyways are there. But in terms of, funding resources, banking, treasury management, resource management, people, and the statutory, the worst off is the statutory management of the various, you had the excise and, taxes and things like that. And as a woman, when you would, approach the system, it's very different. But when you go with a man, things just sail across. I don't know what the dynamics there would be, but as a woman, it's considered as, as a taboo to even enter those offices and deal with the officials.
Right.
So it's all about, even when you start up to, the tapeism is so much that to start off, there are all kinds of hurdles that you cross to actually make it through. And as a woman, the confidence or rather the communication which transpires between the officials, and that is not very comfortable. I mean, they're not so comfortable with the ladies being there, but so they say that why don't you come through a consultant and things like that because of the dealings maybe. So and I was one where I wouldn't actually entertain any kind of a bribe and things like that. So I would make things difficult for my own self. And I remember that we did one of the exports and we followed the entire system because we had a very good excise consultant handling our case. And everything to the T was managed very well. But just because there wasn't any exchange of money that was given, they put in a case against us saying, that that some approval wasn't taken, and to some procedure they mentioned wasn't followed. And so we had to really, fight back the case because we followed everything as per the policies. There wasn't any gap at all. And finally, we did win that. And the amount wasn't huge. It was just a few lakhs. I mean, I could understand if there were crows in that and they had to put a spoke. It made sense. But just for a few lakhs, they had to do something like that. So it very clearly made it very evident that if you don't pay and you don't, you're not a part of the system. And so you'll have to bear the brunt of all these. So these were times where things were not online. And of course, I mean, I think the technology has made it so very good now that you don't have to really enter any offices or neither banks. You can actually do it online. And so that is, I think, a greatest hurdle that has been crossed due to technology. So yeah, there are very many examples like that. But I think entrepreneurship is something, like I say, that failure, like how Sonal says, failure is not an option. Like failure is an everyday thing. It's a part of your journey. It's part of your everyday. And and every day there's a goal that you attain, and you slip, and you still manage to reach that. And it just requires a lot of determination, and that it has to happen to somehow make it happen.
Yeah, I see perseverance and grit as like a common theme in your journeys. So coming to an external difficulty that all of us are currently facing, COVID, right? Like the whole world has changed. The way we do business has changed. The way we do panels has changed. So wondering if, like, say you were starting up in 2021, or what are the things that you would do differently today versus when you, for example, Sonal started Webscale?
Yeah, no, happy to talk about it. And by the way, for the record, Dhanasree, I did not start Webscale. I was actually hired by our founder and CTO. His name is Jay Smith. He's a joy to work with, and I feel fortunate every day to be partnered with someone like him. So he started the business. He brought me on board in 2015. We spent a lot of time initially tinkering, with what was the product, what was the go-to-market, what was our perfect customer type. But to answer your question specifically about COVID, for us, because of the stage that we were at, COVID was, and I shouldn't say this because, we talked about feeling guilty with our success, but COVID has been phenomenally helpful for our business. And the reason is we support e-commerce stores to get online. And existing customers' sales went through the roof. New customers that were scaling and, their infrastructure could not handle the scale jumped on board with Webscale. There was a lot of security incidents that were happening across this vertical because of the amount of finances that were being exchanged. So, security is a big part of what we do. So that was really helpful to us. From what I understand, there were, coming back to the entrepreneurship and making sure that the audience gets what they want. I believe that there were companies that were getting financed, right from, I would say, March to about June, July. There was a pretty big slowdown in investments because I don't think any of us knew how to handle, I don't think I've ever raised money without meeting an investor like 5 or 7 times, at least, if that, right? So never having met someone, never having, had a cup of coffee with them or lunch, or getting to know them as an investor and them getting to know us as a person, it was really hard. But fast forward, I think, everybody, the entrepreneurs and the investors got comfortable with it. So if you're at the fundraising stage, there was a slowdown. If you're in the product development stage, I think there were a lot of companies that that I saw that were not necessarily early stage, but they had to sort of fast forward their ability to provide products that were more hands-off. So I know a lot of enterprise companies that had, heavy equipment that was being deployed in data centers or on premise. They had systems engineers who were flying around and setting up systems. They struggled. Their pipelines vanished. A lot of companies that had, parts coming from places like China, they really struggled because of supply chain getting disrupted. If you're in the software as a service business, it actually, it was an upside because businesses still had to run, and this was a better way of doing it. Like transitioning to an as a service model was really helpful. So, I mean, what would I say to entrepreneurs? I'd say keep doing what you're doing. Is just going to take longer. Obviously, if you're working somewhere else and you're working on an idea for a startup, don't obviously quit your day job and start doing that full time, because it's uncertain times, unless you feel like your startup, augments what's going on. So if you're in an e-commerce thing and you're doing food delivery, or you're doing sort of robotic management of something, and this is the time. Timing is, if you've read a lot of the research reports, it says timing is probably the most critical factor for success of a business. So if you're feeling like the timing is now, go for it. It's instinct, right? You've got to follow your instinct. You've got to make a decision. So I don't know if that answers specifically, Dhanasree, your question, but I kind of give you the range of, how we think about it.
No, that's a good framework to think about, given such uncertainty. But thanks for that. Usha, do you have, do you want to check in? Yeah.
I'm good that we started and we started that. But if you are now, still going, we restricted us for women in technology with this fund. What I would do is I would open it up to various sectors. I would love to have a variety of different sectors, because it also gives us a kind of overlay between one and the other, because they're also interlinked actually, and that really helps in terms of building up more number of entrepreneurs, more number of industries and sectors that you could include. And especially during the time of COVID, that we've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions have happened. A lot of assets buy and sell has happened during this time. And if we could actually start another fund to actually collaborate with various kind of startups which were actually losing out because of COVID, and help them scale, I think that was one of the things that we wanted to do. But because of the times that we were going through, we couldn't really make that happen. And that's one of the things which even now I would definitely love to take on and do this.
Okay.
And
thanks.
Like Sonal mentioned, that the timing is I think the key, and it's been very difficult for many of these startups, because I think which are in the digitization has helped them, because I think this was the most challenging time where they could have actually used the time to grow and scale, because of what problems people were facing. Like some of our companies actually pivoted and tried to enter areas where customers were actually suffering, and so they entered those areas, how they could collaborate with the customers and build the services that was required at that time. So you had to step out of your actually core areas to also circumvent the problems that the customers were actually into. So that way, I think many of them have really done well.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So I think switching gears and like getting into the operational weeds of starting up, etc. Like running a startup is hard, and running a cross-border startup, I believe, is at least doubly hard. How do you manage time as a founder and help, especially with teams on like other sides of the planet? Like,
It's so I will say our Bangalore office is actually our largest office, and it is probably an easier office for me to manage than, and I actually don't have to manage it. We've set up systems a little unique where all our functional leaders are either located in Bangalore or in Boulder, Colorado, or in the Bay Area. So to rewind, the company started in Boulder. Webscale started in Boulder, Colorado. So a lot of our R&D and early support was based there. And then, when I joined, obviously I wasn't going to relocate. So we moved the headquarters to the Valley. We hired sales and marketing here and finance it's here, but R&D and core support stayed in Boulder. So as soon as I came on board, there was, a handful of people that I was very close to in my previous roles that reached out and said they would love to work at Webscale. And very quickly, we had 6 people that were, very core to the business that were in Bangalore. So we quickly opened Webscale India. And all of these people were trusted team members. So we didn't really have to manage them. It was, they actually managed the office. They managed to get all of the pieces together. They helped me with hiring. It was almost like having this extended team there. And then we moved support there. We actually have our support leader, our VP of support is local in Bangalore. So, he's the GM of the office, and all the groups sort of functionally work with their team members. So like our entire marketing team is based out of Bangalore, and they do a phenomenal job of, working with our VP of marketing who's here. I would say having a trusted team is critical. Right. And that is what it's all about. It's all about the people and how much how much they're willing to work with you and you're willing to work with them. And if you care, and I think it is cultural as well. So, non-COVID times, I'm in Bangalore about once in 3-4 months. I spend about a week. That week is not spent in managing the team. It's actually, having fun with the team, getting to know them, going out for lunches and, doing sales calls and talking about the leases and the building and, just being human. And that's what it's about. I don't need to manage any of the people that we have. In fact, a lot of times, like I'll get Skype messages from, some key employees in Webscale who say, hey, we should do this way, or this is costing us too much. And you just have to listen. And the more ownership you give them in the business, the less the cross-border situation is a problem. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the way that work started between India and the US, it started as a back office. And for me, it's never been a back office. Every company I worked at has always had a very critical part of our team in India, in Bangalore. Aryaka had a huge setup there. Speedera had, we started the India office, and now it's Akamai Bangalore, and it's their largest office. So it's how relevant you make that team, and then it sort of manages itself, and you hope at some point it manages you. Because if we could do, everything that we do out of Bangalore as successfully, it all works out.
Awesome. And I guess my follow-up to that is like, I think culture is such an important part of an organization. How do you go about building that culture? Or like, are there any traits that you look for in terms of hiring? What's been your best funnel for hiring, etc.?
So hiring wise in India, interestingly enough, all my leaders have reached out in various situations and wanted to work at Webscale. So what I look for is a few things. One, do they want to be here, right? Do they want to be here, or are they looking for a job? If they want to be here, then if they have the right talent, then I'm more than, into bringing people like that on board, because they will make us better, because they've done their research from the outside. They're not clueless. They understand this market and they understand why they want to be at Webscale.
Right.
Culturally, we're a very transparent company. So we kind of share everything openly, and even our revenue numbers, our goals, our margins, everything is shared across every employee in the company. And I think people tend to like that, because we don't separate out between the US and India in any way. Few things that I look for, at least in the India market, is obviously relevant background, experience, the ability to speak their mind. That is really important for me. So if we interview candidates and they're not able to communicate appropriately, that is challenging. And then most importantly is the sense of loyalty. So if I see people's resumes that are, 6 months in one place, 8 months in another place, 1 year, 2 months in a third place, I find a lot of reason to not work with those people, because I realize that they've put, more attention on title and money over career.
Right.
And that is challenging for me, because I want people who can really come in here, roll up their sleeves and help us build it. And we're happy to pay, whatever the market demands and then some. We have every one of our employees has stock options in India. So we want that, but we don't want people that are hitting a revolving door. We don't want retention is considered to be a big challenge in the India market. We don't want that because it damages,
Right.
Our relationship. So really long answer, and then no drama. That is one of our key. I don't know if you all saw my values post on, what is the Webscale values. It is we're just transparent. We get the work done. There's no drama. There's no structure. There's no hierarchy. There's no, oh, you can't call the CEO because she's busy. You can call me. You can Skype me. You can text me. You can Slack me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Usha, welcome back. I guess we lost you there for a bit, but glad to have you back. Sorry, you're on mute, Usha.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, the hiring bit, we look at, I think, just two things, integrity and passion. I think once these two are there, then we can mold the people on, the technical skills, and all of the skills can be built, but just these two things. And of course, it's an open system. There's no hierarchy. There's no, you can work from, especially now with the COVID, we all work from wherever we are. And I think that's been a good thing now with technology, that we are able to actually use technology in the most efficient way. So I think we've got great people who love basically the concept and are willing to be a part of it to grow. Yeah,
makes sense. I think I have a couple more questions, and after that we'll open it to Q&A. So attendees, if you have any question, just drop it in the Q&A and we'll cover it soon. One quick question is about mentorship. Time and again, I've been advised that we have to have our own personal board of directors so as to assess and help with our professional growth. How do you think about mentorship, and how do you think about seeking your mentors? Yep.
Do you mean board of directors for the company or for my own personal growth?
For your own personal growth, in the sense basically mentors, finding mentors who can help you.
Yeah. So in all honesty, Dhanasree, it's not, look, I'm a CEO, right? And there's a lot of people that reach out looking for help. And just given my own time constraints, I have 2 kids, I have a husband, I have a house to run, I have a company to run, or a company that runs me rather. It's very difficult to commit your own time to other people and mentoring them. So what I've learned in my own journey is almost every interaction that I have is there's something to be taken away from it, but it's going to be, unless you are hiring like a personal coach or you're doing things like that, it's very difficult to get people's attention long term. You may have a board of advisors, you may have an independent board advisor, which is always a good thing as you get older. Older as in a company, I'm getting older, but that's besides the point. That really, really helps. But should you go find 4 or 5 people who are really going to commit to your success? I'd say, if your partner and your parents and your siblings and your family that have so much vested in you are not that group, then, have friends you talk to, sort of be open and be vulnerable to that feedback. And I think Usha had mentioned, something along those lines. I've personally not spent a lot of time just, finding people and waiting for them. It's no one knows our business better than we do. And there's, in this company, we've got 90 people now. These 90 people are my mentors, right? And that's what I kind of look at. And then obviously our investors and our board of directors is they're hugely incentivized to make us successful and to make me successful. And I've found that, my board member from my previous startup at Aryaka is the same board member who brought me to Webscale. So he's incentivized to make me successful, to make his fund successful, to make this company successful. So it's all interrelated.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm a contrarian when it comes to that. I get lots of people reaching out, wanting to be a CEO coach and help me be a CEO. And my feedback is always happy to take your advice, but if you haven't done my job, you don't know how to advise me. You can tell me to stay calm, but I already know that. it's one of those things that you have to ride on, in this journey to really know what it takes. But yeah, instinct, decision making, that's what it's about. I don't mean to sound arrogant and say I don't need anybody's help, but at the end of the day, it's,
I think the fact that, like, for example, your board member at Aryaka was the one who sort of like brought you in here. I think what I take away from that is that mentorship is more organic, like all your interactions are some sort of mentorship in some form or the other. Usha, you have any thoughts on mentorship in general, especially, in the VC world?
Yeah, I think Sonal put it all very well, and she's spoken almost everything there. So like you say, the organized, every incident is actually a learning, but what I see with the entrepreneurs is that they want to do everything themselves. Majority that we come across, and especially the women, what I see is they want to do everything themselves, and that's where actually the time management actually gets affected, and hence there is this requirement of mentorship, which is there because you want to learn everything. Now, if you're not a finance person and then you want to know how to deal with finance, and if you're going to keep learning that and doing, then your core work is not going to happen. So all I believe is delegation. Delegation is the only way to actually scale ahead. And my mentorship is always around that they have to learn to delegate, they have to bring in key people, they have to have a good team. And that's the way that you can work with collaboration with one another. And of course, in terms of your board of directors, to get in board of directors where there are requirements. So I see many of them struggling with marketing as one of the areas and finance as one of the areas, right? And so when you get board of directors who can help you actually scale in those areas, that becomes, a very great way to organize yourself. And it's basically the instincts, like Sonal mentions, your business, you know it better. So the external advisors can advise from their, shoes. But I think when the entrepreneur is working, can take in ideas and can take in suggestions, but what is actually applicable has to be their own reading from it and understanding the deeper nuances of the business and the parts that the various, parts that actually churn out during a time. So it's always about having a couple of options and then which is the best one, and that decision has to be the person themselves. Yeah. So in terms of how do you find your mentorship is where you actually need help. That's where you bring in those kind of role models who can actually take you through. And like Sonal mentioned, time is a very, very crucial factor. Like, you're managing so many things, including home and children and all that. So you can do little, and, and that little has to be actually more effective than trying to do a lot, trying to do it for a lot of people. So I think just being focused is, the key.
Right. We have an audience question, which is, I think, directed at you, Usha. What are some other Indian VC organizations apart from SAHA that focus on women entrepreneurs? So lately we have come across a couple of them. We also have seen now the game, which has actually come over. It's in Bangalore, and they have come out with the Women Entrepreneurship Accelerator and funding model as well. It's called Game. They're doing very well. I think most of the funds that I have come across are in the US. There was one called Sonda Connect in Bangalore, but that doesn't exist now. So in terms of only women entrepreneurship, I think right now Game is the one. Let's Venture also started off as a woman, but then again they do it all across. Yeah. Okay. And coming to, I think before we switch to other questions, I have a question which is in line. What are the challenges that you faced in your professional journey, and any biases, if any, that you faced, both Sonal and Usha, if you want to chime in on this question?
Happy to talk about it. I'll be honest, Dhanasree, I don't feel like I've faced bias that is obvious to me. But I think I also shut any feelings of bias out, because then I'm just making excuses for myself and people around me. So I'm sure there are, in fact, I shouldn't say I'm sure, I'm confident that there are investors out there that when they meet me or look at me, I don't feel, a pattern that they're used to seeing. And it's not that they're overly biased, but they make a decision to not invest in my business because they don't get that comfort zone. And I can't speak for Usha. She's an entrepreneur and investor, but a lot of investments are emotional decisions, and they will do the math, they will do the analysis, they'll go through deals, but at the end of the day, there is a connection. And making a connection with a person across the table that looks and sounds different is harder to make. And I don't want to make excuses for investors, but I think it's one of those things where I don't allow myself to feel like there was a bias. I make it feel like, okay, they said no, I guess they didn't like something about us, move on to the next one. And my board member, the one that I was telling you, his name is Jim Smith. He is from More David Howe, and he's the one who brought me to Webscale. And then BGV, Anik Bose is on my board as well. So
nice.
There's that background, and they all tell me the same thing. They're like, it has nothing to do with you. It's a decision that they make, and there's nothing wrong with you. You're building a phenomenal business. You got to get up and dust it off and go to the next one. And yes, you got 30 no's, but all you need is one yes. So don't worry about it. And so it's having people by my side that reassure me that it's going to work out, and then the other side of it is saying, no, there's no bias. It's just they didn't connect, and we'll just move on to the next thing. Which in some ways I feel, as a woman entrepreneur, maybe that's an unfair way of looking at it, and maybe I should reflect on other people and their challenges. And Usha brought up the point that she's felt it. I just kind of roll with it, and I think it's a little bit of the army background that I'm brought up with. You get elbowed by plenty of people as you're growing up in an army school, central school, and by the time you grow up, you're like, there's no excuses. It's all me.
Usha, your thoughts?
Yes, so I think there is at every stage that you go through, there are biases which happen. So I remember when I joined the first job, there were not very many women CAs. So I was one which, they were interviewing, and in the interview, they asked that you're married and you're going to have a child. So how do you think you're going to work? So, and I think this is a very standard. I mean, you're not surprised with a question like that, because, everybody's asking those kind of questions. So it's very odd, of course, to even, ask a question like that, definitely. But as you go by, I mean, the question is, how are you going to manage your home, and how are you going to manage your, office and things like that. So that makes a difference. So when you become an entrepreneur and you hire in women employees, and you create an environment for them to be comfortable, and give them equal opportunities, equal pay. And I think equal pay is even still a challenge in many organizations, just not in India but abroad too. So why should there be a difference in the pay scales? I don't understand. If you're doing the same job, why should be paid less? And yes, this has been one of the major things has been there, and I have actually seen that women are equally taken care of. I mean, I'm not biased against against men or women, but they have to be given equal opportunities. They have to be given equal pay. They have to be given time off for their maternity. And I think 3 months was actually, which when I was working, it was 3 months, and that's actually pretty less, because you have to give in the time, to a child which is born. You need at least 6 months to a year off. Of course, I did take a break, but many of them, don't want to, because they feel that they're going to lose the job if they take a break longer. So that's the kind of fear also women work with. So I think, we have come a long way, and most of the policies, like this have been taken care of. And really, that's been a really great development in this field. But I think we're still a long way to go. because the challenges that women face on jobs is and trying to meet both ends, it's really, really difficult for them to do that. But yeah, what we can do is still lots to do to go ahead.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to hear different perspectives, and more importantly, thank you for SAHA Fund, and thank you, Sonal, for paving the path for many more women in tech and VC. Question from the audience from Abhishek to Sonal is, how do you ensure uniformity in culture across US and India offices? Please share some tricks you had picked up in your many leadership roles thus far.
I wouldn't say it's tricks really. I think it's how you perceive your setup. Now, I'll give you a little bit of my own background, right? So my father was in the army. For me, I'm almost patriotic to India, even though I'm a US citizen now. It's something that's so deep rooted that my love for India, and when I land there, and the food and the people and the noise and the sounds, and it's just like you can see that I'm thrilled to be there, right? So that is something it's not a trick. It's actually how I feel about when I get there, and it is critical. I was sharing with one of our investors. They were looking at opening an office in India, and they're a French company, and with a US office, and they don't have any one of their executives who is Indian. And I told them, I said, that's a challenge you're going to face, because it's not personal. It has to be personal at some level on why you're doing it, right? The second thing is, stock options. That's my CEO from Speedera, worked with him across 2 startups, and he started this thing in my head that every employee, no matter where their location, has to be a stockholder in the business. And, the process of doing it is a lot more straightforward now. So, definitely do that. The quality of our office space in India, till we moved into this office here, was arguably the best office out of all of our locations. So our Boulder office was where we started. Here we were in this office that was startup space right above a train station where every window used to rattle every 10 minutes. But our Bangalore office was, air conditioned, good food, very corporate environment, very good quality cubes, all of those things. So that was, just the quality of space and people having that love for where they go to work and that pride for this is my office. I think that's really, really important. I don't think we give it enough attention. I am kind of tough on our admin team to make sure that the office stays spotlessly clean, whether it's checking out the bathrooms every time I go there, or the kitchen, or the quality of food, or the inside of the refrigerator and things like that. I really care about all that, and it's just a reflection of our own pride for our business. So I know those are small tricks, but I kind of feel that. Beyond all of these sort of superficial things, I think it's fundamentally allowing your team to have a voice and listening to them. And like I brought up, I have one of our leaders who runs our provisioning team. His name is Gaurav. He reaches out pretty regularly to give me feedback on something that is procedural that needs to be fixed. And the very fact that what he says matters, that is the best way to develop that culture, that it's not a back office, it is a critical part. And, the people that work there are completely invested in what we're doing. So, our VP of support, who's come on board weekly, gives us feedback of we should do things this way, we should do these bonuses. Without a doubt, he's on the ground, he knows better how to do it. We're going to do it. Right? So it's listening. At least to me, that has seemed to make a difference.
Thanks for the question, Abhishek. And I guess we have 6 more minutes to go. Is there any other audience question? No, not right now. But one question from Aditya actually is, what are some of the women entrepreneurs both of you look up to? And finally, what is your advice to women entrepreneurs or women fund managers starting now?
Usha, you want to go first, and then I go after that?
Sure. So women entrepreneurship, like I already mentioned, that we look at passion as one of the key things. And once they are passionate, I think they somehow make things happen. So it's just about how passionate they are about, what they want to do. And of course, with that comes your team building, teamwork, and building up a great product and design and things like that. But I think the main thing is about how well they are able to carry, the whole team along with them to execute. So the execution is the main. I think ideas are great, but it's all about the execution capabilities. And once they're passionate about it, I think they did somehow make the execution happen. So we've seen that the women have actually done a fantastic job in this. What was the other thing? Sorry, I missed out on that.
No worries. I'll repeat. Who are some of the women entrepreneurs or maybe women leaders who you personally look up to? Like, who are your role models?
So Kiran Majumdar is, of course, one of the greatest entrepreneurs that we all look up to, that she's really built from, zero to ground up. And the way she's done it is extremely, and in the most difficult space like biotechnology. So I think she's one of the greatest role models. And of course, in the banking, you have so many others who are there, like Renuka. And these are some of the names that straight away we come up with. But in terms of the capital markets, yes, we are yet to see a lot of, women coming up. And that's where we want to bring in more and more women into even the investment field, who can actually become investment managers. And then down the line, it would take at least a decade for them to, really take charge of the industry. So hopefully we should have more. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Sonal?
Yeah. So, I kind of think about, there's a lot of, obvious names of people who've made it, and, people who are like Kiran Majumdar. There's a lady called Vinita Gupta. She's, the first woman who's taken a company public in the US at the same time that her husband was taking a different company public in the US. So there's people like her that are just phenomenal, and they're really down to earth and grounded in every interaction. For me, the people that I really look up to, and this may sound a little strange to at least the group of people, the entrepreneurs that are listening, is the ones that didn't have the privilege, the ones, so I would say I grew up in a home where my dad and mom were, pretty determined to make us successful. And they threw every tool in their toolkit, whether it was pushing us or, the education, the tutors, the whatever we needed between me and my sister. And both of us, if we had not succeeded, that would have been a surprise. But if you think of a lot of other people that do not have that support system, a lot of, whether it's women or men, that, they are the first ones in their family to go to college, or they're the first ones that, against all odds, find a way to be successful. Or if there's a lot of unseen people when I go to India, and maybe I become more sensitive because I've been out of it for so long. Mm-hmm. You see, the maid that works in my sister's home, and she is the entrepreneur. She has made a decision to leave her home and, educate her kids and work 16 hours a day in people's homes. She's the entrepreneur that for me is the scariest thing, because if I had been dealt the cards that she's been dealt, I don't know how I would have handled it. There's over here, you'll find there's women who are like the lady who cuts my hair. She's a single mom with 2 young boys, and in the last 14 months, she's made no money sitting at home. So she's opened up her garage, and she's doing whatever she needs to do to support her family and be successful. So those are the entrepreneurs that I think we don't talk about. And if they don't get support at that level, you don't get entrepreneurs like me and maybe Vinusha, who are arguably from privilege. And the fact that we are successful it's not a surprise. It's just, we got everything handed to us in every way. So, I mean, for me, it's a strange feeling, because I talk to a lot of college kids who don't have anybody in their families who've been to college. Their moms don't have anything more than a high school degree and had them when they were 16 or 17, or all kinds of stories you can imagine. Those are the ones that really, are going to create the next generation of it. So it's just...
No, with that, I think, with those inspiring women entrepreneurs and fund managers, I close the session because we're up on time. Thank you so much, Sonal. Thank you so much, Usha. And thank you so much, Aditya, for making this panel happen. I'm privileged to be able to moderate this panel and have firsthand access to your journeys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
for
Sonal. Thank you, Dhanasree. Thank you, Aditya, for making this happen. Yeah, I hope it was good.